Hey everyone, just before we get into this episode, just a quick announcement. We have some new stuff on our web shop. We've t-shirts, some cool posters, and some signed copies of Matt's book, Painted People. So it's beneaththeskinshop.com and the link is in the description of this episode. Anyway, back to the show.
Sure. Tom, what you been up to?
Was drinking pints with you last night. My ceiling is collapsing in my room.
Is your life collapsing?
Sometimes fucking feels like that, to be honest. But other than that, I'm all good. I'm all good. If you're listening to this as the time it goes out to the public, whatever we haven't sold at Brighton is going to be online. So please, please buy it. I've spent so much money on fucking t-shirts and books and posters. I go in there, please. I don't like being in debt. But all that aside, I am in a great mood because this is an episode I've been really looking forward to for literally a year nearly. Like, we're kind of 3 months away from this happening a year ago. So I'm so excited. And Matt, do you want to introduce our incredible guest that I have to say kia ora to?
Yeah, we're so lucky and happy to have the amazing Te Rangitu with us, who will introduce himself in a second. But I first met or saw Te speaking at the Royal Academy like a long time ago now, and then bumped into him again at the National Maritime Museum. And I do hold a little bit of resentment for him because he used to live in Colchester and then he moved away, left Essex, and has gone to the sunny wilds of Bristol. But he's a New Zealander born and bred, and yeah, welcome to the show, Tay.
Hey, kia ora. Kia ora tātou. Ngā mihi nunui ki a koutou, ki a kōrua. Kua hara mai I te kōrero I pāna ki tātou kōrero I roti tēnei rā. Nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa. So, big greetings to you too. Thank you for inviting us on, or me on. So my name is Te Rangitu Netana. I hail from the far north reaches of the North Island of Aotearoa of New Zealand. I'm descended from 3 different tribes: Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Wai, and Te Arawa. And yeah, I've been probably residing in UK for about 9 years now. So yeah, that's me.
And you told me you came here for love.
I did. I know. I got snared.
Not for the weather.
It was a bit of a tag and release, to be honest. I first tattooed her in New Zealand, and then I let it go, see what happened, and it came back. So I was like, sweet. So it was a bit of a science study.
I have to say, everyone listening is in for an incredible episode because Tay is the only man or only person in general I've ever seen talk where Matt doesn't say anything for more than 5 minutes. So this is going to be a good one.
I guess we should start off just by talking about you for a second, like how you got into tattooing and what your story is. And then, of course, we'd like to talk much more about the heritage and traditions of the practices that you undertake and where they come from and where they are now. But maybe the best place to start is tell us about yourself.
Sure. I mean, I was born and bred in a little town called Kaikohekohe in the far north. Came from a pretty staunch kind of Māori family, I guess. We were where we are was probably considered one of the most kind of poorest kind of areas, I guess, where Māori are and things, and the big farming community used to have a lot of things going for it. Of course, government things and stuff like that. They sold kind of our forestry, our railways closed down. There was a whole bunch of things. So there's a lot of joblessness. And we kind of, managed to kind of really, it was through our traditional ways of growing and hunting and just kind of basically getting by and having a lot of family around. We were rich in our own kind of ways, I guess. We had a lot of privilege being Māori, and of course my father and my grandfather and grandmother, they were all native speakers, so we were rich in our language and rich in our kind of culture. Of course, later on we kind of moved to the cities because it was hard to live in the country. And of course, there was work in the cities and stuff. So we all moved kind of thing to the city. My dad got sick. I was probably around about, I guess, when I was 17. Used to walk past the tattoo shop and used to kind of think about things when I was a kid. And my grandparents used to talk about in the conversations that they used to talk about our old tattooing kind of stories and mythologies and of course, we had at the time, there was a lot of a gang culture, I guess, and that had taken on tattooing. And, to be honest, it was what it was for its time. And I was lucky enough to kind of hassle the hell out of a tattoo shop, totally lied about my age.
That's the classic story, right? No matter where you're from in the world, that's always the story.
Yeah, so I ended up doing artwork for them to start off with, and then coffees and cleaning up, and eventually, actually, I think they kicked me out because I don't know, someone was going through a bad one. I don't know, but they because I drew for people, kind of custom work, so people would come in and ask for me, so they re-upped me, and I was in there, but I kind of came with a bit of a plan. I'll come back if I can have an apprenticeship. So I scored myself an apprenticeship, not at the legal age, but they didn't know. Um, there wasn't a lot of legal stuff going on in that tattoo shop anyway. So
Was that with Pākehā guys or with with Māori guys?
that was actually with a guy that was with Parker, but one of the guys, who was that? It was Phil Matthias. He was a German Samoan, and the rest of them were pretty much Pākehā kind of thing. They were all kind of around the bikie scene and all that kind of thing. And it probably taught me what not to do more than what it taught me what to do, kind of thing. So it was definitely a classic experience of being in a tattoo shop. Yeah. So where was I? Yeah. So it was working with kind of your conventional tattooist to start with.
And did your family have tattoos? Was that something that
Not
your family?
not my general family, not my mother or father. It wasn't really. I had cousins and things like that had tattooing, but then also at the same time, I was also out searching for people that were really more towards Māori tattooing and traditional tattooing. So I came across Laurie Nicholas and Gordon Hatfield. They were carvers from Rotorua, from Whakarewarewa. Um, Gordon was from up north, and Laurie was from in Te Arawa, which is kind of mid North Island, Rotorua, and ended up they were giving what we call wānanga. Wānangas are teaching times, and they were talking about the concept of bringing traditional tattooing back.
I mean, that was quite a kind of live conversation when you were growing up, right? About where Māori traditional tattooing was going and what its future could be. That was something that was sort of quite live when you were starting out at that time, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of conversations that were being had about, I mean, there was a whole bunch that we needed to kind of also learn about the cleaning side of things, the sterilization. That was a major thing to learn about because if one of us did something wrong, all of us would get kind of labeled for it, kind of thing, and it'd just be another thing. So we had to make sure we did things properly. And so that was with the machines and things like and tools like that. And in New Zealand, we didn't really have the kind of tools that you could get if you were from America or from Australia. So a lot of the machines were homemade. You made them yourself, and they still worked. But of course, it was always about bettering your skills and stuff. And yeah, so there was a lot of kind of conversation really about how we wanted to approach moko or bringing back our narratives and talking about how we wanted to kind of instead of using a tattoo shop kind of concept of things, it was really like, so how do you, the questions were like, how do we choose, who has the right to wear, kind of what were these kind of markings for? And so it was right at the beginning of things. So we had to go around to different areas and speak with elders and try to kind of piece together a lot of the history and the protocols that we were looking at trying to put into place.
I mean, I remember, growing up in the UK and seeing the sort of start of people sort of really appropriating Māori tattooing, like people like famously in the UK, Robbie Williams getting something that was sort of very Pacific-esque, and there was a bigger conversation about quote unquote tribal tattooing in general. And it seems like, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was you guys having to have that conversation, or realizing that you had to have that conversation amongst yourselves, otherwise people were going to have it for you.
Yeah, so there was definitely discussions of appropriation, and that there were tattooists out there doing things. I remember, I think Alex Binney came over one time with Curly, and they kind of hit a couple of walls. But we kind of, actually, Robbie Williams, I tattooed Robbie Williams, so that was quite interesting, actually, going through
amazing. That. Oh, good. That's good. That's good to know.
So yeah, that was back. I mean, when I was in Amsterdam, and I was giving a talk in a Hanky Panky's when Hank Schumacher had the museum, the first museum in Amsterdam there. So I was working in the museum, and I didn't even know who Robbie Williams was, to be honest. Nice guy, though, really nice guy. But a lot of the time, Hank's shop was like famous people came in there and got tattooed. You had, I think there was some might have been the Chili Peppers, Stevie Ray Vaughan, kind of. You had Booyah Tribe, and you had we did Cypress Hill there. And so it was that kind of shop, it was the shop to be in at the time, and it was really kind of a push and shove, it was almost, you had to fight for your corner kind of thing, And so, and anyway, meeting with Robbie and stuff like that, a lot of people, even going back home, when I returned home after tattooing Robbie Williams, they didn't realize it was it was a Maori person that had tattooed him. And I remember being in a kitchen with my cousins, and they were all talking about this Chinese guy that tattooed Robbie Williams, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh yeah, who's this guy?" Like, who's this Chinese guy? And I don't know, man, it's not cool, bro. Now the Chinese guys are doing our tattoos, And I'm sitting there going, I knew it was me, but I wanted to milk it, kind of thing. So I was sitting there and I was going, man, what should we do about it, man? Should we find out where he lives and burn his house down? What should we do? And they're like, yeah, and I'm like, and then my cousin comes in and goes, what you fools talking about? And he's like, and they're like, oh, that Chinese guy that tattooed Robbie Williams. And he's like, that's this fella here, man. He's no Chinaman. He's from up north. And I was like, damn, bro. I was trying to milk that, And it was like, at the end of the day, I was like, bro, hey, don't follow me home and burn my house down. It's not mine. I actually still living with my mum. So, that's not.
I mean, that whole moment, really, I guess, sort of brought the traditional practices, or some modern sort of iteration of them, really back into the public spotlight, right? That was it felt like a real moment of time where all of a sudden.
I felt a little bit that, there was other, you had Michael Frante from Spearhead and stuff, and then you had kind of Ben Harper, and they were all tattooed by Gordon and different tattooists that I knew, but it just so happened to be Robbie that everybody picked on, and so it was like, a lot of people didn't know, and there was a lot of discussion back home. In fact, I think it's in a university paper that annoyingly my sister reminds me that I'd never been to university, but she has to do a paper on her brother. And but it did pose that question. It did pose that question whether it was all right for non-Māori to wear moko, and so a lot of the time it was great because you were right in the beginning of things and you were starting fires and seeing what was going to come from it. And so I think from all of that testing and without even knowing it, putting those things in the forefront and having those kind of discussions and those debates, they've really molded where moko is today. So it's been a great thing. I mean, it's good to. I think even in our culture, it's good to challenge, the status quo, and always test those kind of boundaries, see how far we can do it. We've always done that as a people. We've always tested our kind of rules and that's how they evolve. It's not as if, and I think when people think of Māori as a traditional people, well, we're not really kind of thing. And as such, we've evolved so much kind of through time, what we consider traditional was once contemporary. So
yeah, and I think that's such a perfect point that I think people really forget. I mean, I heard this described once. If you go to a big survey museum, British Museum, or the Caibron in France or whatever, like any of these big surveys, Western culture, European culture gets a timeline, and non-Western, non-European culture gets a place, right? So you've got 1800 to 1900 in Europe, but then you have Asia, right, as a place, and through that colonialist lens, non-Western culture gets to be sort of quite unquote, as you said, timeless, right? Where somehow people forget that, or maybe not forget, but kind of imagine that this is some ancient practice that is kind of folded in aspect. It's got a huge heritage and a timeline and a historical depth, but it also has these, as you said, it has these iterations, it has these developments, it has these changes.
Oh yeah,
I think people forget that.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, for people who may be unfamiliar with Maori Moko, can you maybe talk about that timeline, but also what is its importance to Maori culture, both contemporaneously, right now, and in the past?
Okay, so for us, moko it's developed over a period that there was times where there was bans on there was the Tuhunga Suppression Act, which kind of banned us from practicing any kind of tradition kind of thing, so that it was illegal to practice. And slowly, systematically, in colonization, they tried to kind of cut out language and all sorts of stuff like that. So we kind of in the 90s we started looking at it as a form. If we're bringing our language back, we needed to bring everything back, right? So because it was all linked with each other, and Tā Moko was one of those things that we could use as a medicine, that we could reconnect ourselves back to our original selves and our belief structures and all of that. And it was one of those kind of links that really it captures narrative, story about lineage, a whole bunch of things, your connection to your taiao. Your taiao is your environment, right? So it even goes into our environment, our mountains, our rivers, our ancestors that first landed, how long they were there, that whole kind of, even though I guess they say we don't have a written language, but in fact, I believe we probably got 6 ways of writing. So you have kind of carving, weaving, dance. We have different types of expression. It's not phonetically kind of done so much. I mean, it is now, but even that's quite weird. The spellings come from somewhere in France and somewhere else. But anyway, so if you kind of look at, for us, at the beginning of time, if we look at our religious kind of narratives of the god of tattooing, Ruo Moko. So Ruo Moko is the god of earthquake and volcano. And in his name, it says Ru. Ru is when the land rumbles or the earthquake. O is when the volcano erupts and you see the soot in the air. Moko is when the lava flows and scars the earth, right? And so when we're tattooing, it's the same kind of thing. It's the birthing. He's the youngest of one of our 72 gods. And so when you're going through that process of kind of going from one level of understanding to another level of understanding, and knowledge wise, we use moko to kind of talk of that birthing of the person. So when the skin is shaking and then the blood erupts, and then we wipe the blood away and we're left with the scar kind of thing, and that those patterns become somewhat like a complementary role, between they become a complementary role between the wearer and their ancestry kind of thing. So it's reconnecting the person to things that may have been broken and stuff. So we use that, and you can use that with every human really in this kind of planet, really, is to reconnect to who we are.
Yeah. And I think it's super interesting, like, obviously me knowing like Irish history, Irish people not really having as much written language as the colonizer, but it seems like the modern resurgence of Moko seems not only as this kind of like oral history, anthropological like study and connection to those who come before, but also feels like a very like distinct decolonial act as well. It's the reclamation of like, this is what was taken from us, and like you said, you 6 different ways of speaking. No, that doesn't matter words written down, but this is the language that you communicate history and ideas and your
Sure.
culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it is that decolonization. It is kind of, making your environment native to you, like making yourself, reintroducing yourself and being more native, And
One of the things I'm really interested in is how well. I get you talked about like yourself, like not even having a lot of information initially to go on because that period, like prior to even the 1990s, there wasn't. The only way you could find out about this really from any credible sources was to talk to people. I mean, we had our friend Maya Cielu Jakobsen, who was also at that Royal Academy event that I met you at. I met her for the first time, and she said the same thing about tattooing in the Arctic with Inuit, because in her culture, tattooing had been really really eradicated in a way, even more severely than happened in New Zealand, and yeah, like she's had to kind of rediscover all this stuff. So I mean, what was it like for you as a kid who was getting into tattooing and realizing that you wanted and needed to know more about where these practices came from? Like, how did you go about finding out? Was it just asking the right questions?
Yeah, that is knowing how to ask the questions. There is a kind of protocol and a way of speaking to your ancestors. You just don't go walking up to them and go, "Hey, what about this?" There is actually, you'll just possibly get, ignored. But so there is a way to enter the kind of into the house, into the space, or creating the space, and creating a space, a safe space for our elders to feel that we are, we have great good intentions, right? Because even with possibly with the gang kind of things that were going on, and I'm not in no way against the gangs or what they did, because they were a reaction to a part of colonization themselves. And so they had a place in our in that, and they take their place in our history as well. But I think possibly some of our elders, they were watching, they were seeing things, and they just closed down, kind of thing. So you had to create a safe space, a place where they realized that us young starts we had good intentions, kind of thing, and so there was a lot of talking and there was a lot of debating. And also I also went, like when I first saw Uhi or Ao work, was Samoan tattooist Paulo Suluape, and then we became good friends. That gave me a kind of opportunity to go to Samoa and see it in unbroken kind of tradition, and see how that worked there, and then from there to Hawaii, working with Keone Nunes, and being able to sit with him and eventually being taught by him. And so, I started going back from the root to the fruit type thing. So the fruit went to the root. And so, and to find out, maybe where's the origins of these things? Because you can even follow our language through Polynesia and the development of its language. So then you can kind of follow the development of the tools as well.
Maybe that's a good into some of these kind of origin stories, origin mythologies, about where tattooing comes from. I love that story from about the differences in gendering of tattooing between Fiji and Samoa. Where am I right in saying that the story there is that the ancestral figures who were bringing tattooing from Fiji to Samoa, or the other way around, forgot which gender it was supposed to be?
Well, there were two sisters. I'm not that kind of. I don't know the full kind of story, so I don't want to kind of plagiarize myself or anything like that. But yes, there were two sisters. They came from a place, Fiji, whether it was Fiji or a place called Fiji at the time, because our islands also changed their names through time and stuff. So there's more than one name for sometimes with islands. And when you get different dialects, you also get different changes of things. But as we know, as those two sisters, as they were coming over, some kind of thing went on before they got to Samoa, and they dove deep into the water and came up, and they were disorientated after, I think they were speaking a chant, and basically to tattoo the women. And then when they came back, it was changed to tattoo the men. So the pea is a bat, and so it's a little triangle that sits on the back piece of the in the spine, and that's the pea or the bat. And like, well, the bat that they're talking about is the female bat, right? So it holds the bat babies holds in the middle, and they don't kind of put that baby down at all. They always carry that baby, and that baby represents their responsibility or their people. And so when the matai or chiefs have the honor to wear those things, that represents they carry their people with them. So and it's very kind of similar to us as well. I mean, but so you start to hear those little narratives and those things, and you're like, wow, this is cool, right? I was young and just learning so much from different Polynesian groups and stuff. So it was good.
So I suppose kind of a question I want to ask about like the modern role of Moko and community. Can you talk maybe a little bit about, at the moment there's obviously a lot of around the world people being more interested in traditional cultural arts. What is the feeling at the moment? Are more young people getting their Moko done, or is it something that has kind of had a peak in couple of years ago and is now at a steady line, or is it increasing?
Oh, it's absolutely increasing. It's we have more and more young people wearing mataora, wearing their traditional face, their kauai, the chin tattoo. We have it's a huge resurgence back home. Also, it kind of marries and does well with the political scene as well, because we're doing so well as a people. I mean, of course, now we have a national government that's not so great, but the thing is, yeah, with the thing is, and it's happening all over the world, isn't it? So, but the thing is, our people are strong. Our people are really in our languages, in our schools, in our TV, our radio. We're there. We've got a good presence. Of course, we're also marrying with New Zealanders and making beautiful children, and we're all speaking our language. It's a wonderful place to be. Of course, we've got negativity, people that I don't know why, I don't really bother with it either, kind of thing. But at the moment, Moko is so strong. It's really empowering our people, and to move back and to try to look at kind of, like I said, going into things like the way that we grow, our moon structures, our watching the month and what different months are doing through the stars, and bringing back that old language as well, and just having the choice now that we can that we can kind of start growing, and we can start doing things kind of using our old narratives, and then it's backed up with the tattooing, it's backed up with the language, it's backed up with a whole bunch of things. So it's just now giving, through the treaty, I guess, between the British and Māori, is giving, it's putting back in place what the treaty said that we were supposed to be like, kind of thing. It was supposed to be an equal kind of basis, and I think we're really affecting a lot of New Zealanders in a positive way, anyway. And we make a lot of money for New Zealand as well, so no one comes to see the sheep, mate. So it's like,
Hey, and listen, you make incredible rugby players. That's all I'm gonna say.
well, we've got the islands as well, so we're lucky to have
Yeah.
Fiji and Samoa and all that as well. So we can't put it down to kind of just New Zealanders. I think we.
But I think I want to ask, and maybe this is a bit more of a difficult question. A lot of people talk about obviously the appropriateness of non-Maori people wearing, Maori tattoos and moko, and I've seen some people suggest of the kind of the development of this new style that is, can be worn by the whiteys and other people that isn't necessarily moko, but
It's it's always been all right for non-Maori to wear moko, certain moko, mainly on the body, not so much the face. Sometimes not so much the legs, if they're lucky and they have friends, and they can be whāngaid into a family, they could be given kind of the legs. But it does take, the common understanding is, if you're not Maori, you shouldn't be doing moko. But as a Maori, you can tattoo non-Maori, only because that, unless that person is fluent in the language and the culture, he's not going to be able to kind of guide you in the right way.
And that's something that I wanted to kind of dig into as well, is that the importance of Moko to the Maori people isn't just it being a visual practice of tattooing, it is the community aspect of it as well. I was wondering, could you talk to me right now, say you, before we were recording, you're speaking about going back to New Zealand and you'll be tattooing family members. What is the role of Moko in the community and that process that makes it what it is?
Right. I guess, there's, an example of some of the things I do back home. There's a little bit more structure to it. There's a situation where I had triplet boys. They're amazing. Their mother's in the government at the moment. But anyways, they the process first starts within the family, I guess. And it's all different for everybody. But this particular family chose to do it this way. And so they wanted to show respect to their parents. And so they had a formal meeting where the sons cooked for the parents and showed that they were ready to become, adults and take on a little bit more responsibility, to show that kind of changing of the guard as well, to show their parents that, this is how we want to kind of, and they presented their case, and then it took the parents to then get in contact with me, and then I ended up with something like, I don't know, maybe 20 people outside waiting to sit down with me and speak. And so I sat down with the parents and the uncles and aunties, not really talking with the boys. It was really up to the elders and them to discuss what they wanted to represent. So they told me the story, and then we together as a family chose the patterns. So taking into consideration their tribal ties, and basically putting these protocols into kind of process, kind of thing. Not every family does this. This is an old way of doing it, and this was a way that this family wanted to approach it. But most times it is really about your tribal connections, and talking of your tribal connections. Sometimes, you have people that only want to be tattooed by say me because I'm related to them, because I come from the same tribe or the same family. And so there's a huge responsibility that you have that you hold on your shoulders, that you end up possibly tattooing, four generations from one family. So you're dealing with grandchildren, so and so you've tattooed grandparents, and that's a huge kind of not only responsibility but an honor to even do. And I guess with our kind of people as well, we believe in our mana. So our mana is our kind of honor, our kind of where we sit within a family, where we sit within a tribe, what we do. And it's not that we boast of this thing called mana. It's not even up to us to say it, but the people will say it. And they'll give you that kind of honor kind of thing, but you never go around boasting about it. So yeah, I don't know. Does that kind of answer the question? I don't know. I can ramble a little bit.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I suppose talking about that responsibility as the artist, what goes into the design process then when you're creating this Moko? Hey, are you enjoying the show? If you really like Beneath the Skin and you want to help support us, you can do so on Patreon. For little as £5 a month, you can help make this show possible, help us buy research materials. So if you like the show and you want to support us, consider kicking us a few quid a month. And you'll get everything from bonus episodes to Q&As, and you can even vote on what tattoo I'll get when we reach a certain subscriber count. Matt, have you got anything to say?
You should really definitely fund the Patreon, because tattoo history is massive, right? Deep, wide, complicated. We're covering some big hit topics on the main feed, but on the Patreon subscriber only feed, we'll be getting into some really more interesting, niche, deep topics you don't want to miss out on. And honestly, the chance to kind of decide what Thomas gets on his body is probably just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Subscribe, chuck us a few quid. Don't miss out on this chance to ruin Thomas's body forever.
I like to kind of, I like to find out. I try to, if you break it in a simple form, maybe past, present, future, right? So your past is your foundations. And, I find it difficult over here because people don't really know their foundations. So back home, it's a little bit easier because we still know our kind of foundations. But foundations can also be about who has taught you. It could be a grandmother, it could be a grandfather, an uncle that stands out within your family. And so we'll kind of talk about the things that they taught or they've been taught, and so I'll kind of represent that person as a teacher, as a person that's passed on some kind of memory, and it becomes a kind of narrative within the persons, that they've been affected from, how they were brought up, how possibly the good and the bad that's happened within their life kind of thing. And how do we kind of deal with that? How do we kind of look at ourselves? Sometimes our gods have been described sometimes as our emotions, and that our gods sit within us, and so we kind of try to find those emotions, and it's one thing obviously to get tattooed. It's another thing to kind of walk with it, and to walk with it well, kind of thing, and to be able to kind of, how do you put these things into practice? And it really comes down to first understanding what that pattern is. Whenever I've kind of tried to figure out or tried to think about what my ancestors were thinking, it's always been a pattern that I'll learn about, and it takes me back. And it's like reading a book. You start to kind of almost, you can hear them talking to you in your head. You can hear the accent. You can hear the what they're kind of trying to give you and portray to you. So then I kind of, because of that, I can kind of start to kind of manipulate and create with it, right? And so then you have your present, where you are now, where you sit in the middle to understand your past and your future. And that could be the things that you may believe in now, or your own belief structures, and those things always change. And then you got your future. Not that we can see our future, but we can understand our future from our past. we can certainly find a direction that's our kind of, our aspirations in life, all of those kind of things. So that's how I'll kind of compose simply over here. I've been honored to kind of meet so many different kind of people over here in England, with so many different interesting stories, from Scotland to kind of Norway to whatever. And we sit down and we try to find the common thread as humans that we can work together and try to, so people can understand that all of us kind of had this kind of way of thinking, right? Because we all came from one place and we all living on one place kind of thing. So, it's the understanding of how our environment affects us and how we affect our environment, and knowing that if we change something on one side of the river, it's going to affect the other side of the river. So it really does matter that we humans, we're connected in so many different ways. And so I guess that if that's how I kind of compose, that's kind of the kind of craziness that goes on in my head when I'm sitting down and kind of thinking about a person. And sometimes you come across people that are just so, it really it takes you in a whole different direction. And that's really awesome. It starts to push kind of my own boundaries of, I think, with our own traditions as well, we need to evolve them as well. But anyway, yeah.
Hmm. And I think it's a really like beautiful art form that is beautiful both as art and as a connection to cultural heritage. What obviously the process of doing Moko in this kind of mode is, I feel like I'm right in saying it's a quite intense, it's a beautiful and intense practice. How does it feel for you when you're doing Moko on someone either in your family or someone that you might not be related to, and understanding the kind of weight of meaning of what you're doing?
Yeah, because you feel like such a sort of intensely empathetic person, Tay. And whenever I've heard you talk about your practice, like it feels like it's a very emotional thing for the people being tattooed, but also for you doing it, right? Like there's this big emotional, empathetic component to this practice.
It's definitely a way of life. You have a responsibility to guide a person and things like that. So I certainly have to be right in my own mind, and if I don't, you can get heavy with kind of things. So I have processes that I do that I've been taught to kind of cleanse myself of these things and wash these things away kind of thing, and restart and reboot. So there's foods and things that I'll try to eat and stuff to get myself back to kind of the right place, and things that I definitely need to take care of myself, and be, my father was a peaceful kind of medicine kind of person as well. So he kind of, he always said, if you're not feeling well, you don't do the work kind of thing, and you make sure that you're 100%, because you don't want to give that on to not only myself. If I come back in a heavy way, I can't be in the bed with my wife or with my kids. I have to go kind of wash myself and do certain things, and then I'm right. I'll reboot and start again, kind of thing. So yeah, it does take on a lot of kind of I find I'm pretty empathetic. I think a lot of my family are. Just you know, and the intention, I guess, out of it is to try to create a positive person, a positive way of thinking and being. A lot of my, I don't call them customers, friends, they become friends, and then I say to them, bro, if you need to call me, just let's have a chat kind of thing, because there's a lot of people that are going through some heavy stuff. And if I can even try to help to develop their own way of kind of understanding something in a positive way, I'm there. I'm there for my nephews as well, and that's how we were brought up back home. We have a lot of counselling kind of thing without even knowing it. We had uncles and aunties and people that we could go see that were wise. And if we had any kind of problems, and it could be 3 o'clock in the morning, whenever, you could turn up and you'd sit down and you could just nut things out, and you'd always leave in a positive way. So we were lucky to have that as tribal people, to have guides and to kind of be able to go look at nature and feel our kind of presence there and things like that. So
Does that kind of emotional charge, is that emotional charge really heightened when you're tattooing on the face, when you're actually tattooing Tā Moko on people's faces? Because that feels, I mean, it's very, of course, in New Zealand history, is a very political thing. In general, getting one's face tattooed is a real statement of identity, no matter where you're from. And as I understand it, that reclamation or reviving, if that's even the right word, of facial tattooing has been a real important sort of part of this resurgence that you talked about. And again, I wonder if there's something particular for you as an artist, how that functions in the kind of culture.
We always kind of sit on the ground. We don't sit on chairs or up high. How I was taught was always down on the ground. Down to the mat that you're kind of sitting on. You don't stand on that mat with shoes on. That becomes a sacred kind of place. And people don't normally stand behind the tattooist. That's the place for your ancestors. The ancestors will sit behind the tattooist, and they'll view what's being done in front. So you're creating a kind of sacred space by just, a lot of Indigenous stuff is quite subtle. We don't tell anybody these things. But we have these little things that we put in place that no one really notices. Things that might be a bowl of water somewhere, or there'll be something there to keep it safe to do certain things. We don't have food around the blood because the blood is sacred, and so we don't bring food into those kind of areas or anything like that. So we create that space. So we also go into a sacred space, and we come out of a sacred space. So there's also a way afterwards that people don't see, that what we do afterwards and the way we wake our tools and put our tools to sleep and all of those kind of things. So people don't really kind of see those things, those processes that we kind of practice. But yeah.
And that's as it should be, I guess. I mean, did you talk about tools? You said you learned to use ui from in Samoa, right? Like
No, in Hawaii.
was that in Hawaii?
Yeah.
From Kai Nunes? Was that an interesting, difficult step for you to move from machines to ui tools?
Oh, it still is. I mean, it still is. I mean, over here, it's my bread and butter is the machines, So I mean, eventually, I really want to move and want to get to the space where I can drop the machines altogether, and just use the tools. But because they're slower and because I'm slow, but it takes time and things, and there's more until my daughter decides to fully become my apprentice. Then I'll have someone to help me all the time. But the end of the day, it was an amazing. It was pretty easy. I've known Keone for 20 odd years now, and we're good friends, and we share a couple of laughs in our history. But he was taught by Paulo Suluape, and Paulo was an amazing practitioner. And now when you see Keone is like the ultimate kind of student after him, because he's just taken it to another level and really made it, the tools are excellent. His tools are so amazing. The whole method of tool making, right into the process of his, I was lucky to witness graduation as well, a type of graduation going from levels of practitioners, and all of the boys that he's kind of taught, some of the most amazing people I've ever met. So they're steeped in their tradition, and when actually Keone did my face, only because I wanted my face done with traditional tools, and there wasn't anybody that I knew of back home that actually knew how to do that. And so it was a collaboration between me and Keone, And, you know, being tattooed underneath Maui's grandmother's mountain in Hawaii and Waianae was truly an amazing experience to hear the seabirds and the hot air and the frangipani in the air is just amazing. You know, it was like being taken back in time. The tapping was like hearing the music that, you know, was almost saying to something inside of me and something outside of me, really, that we're still here. You know, we're still doing this kind of thing. And that was so empowering to
I mean,
receive.
that tool development that you talk about actually is sort of goes back to something you said earlier on about this sort of development and creation and bringing the traditions into the modern era, right? Because as you said, figuring out how to work in traditional, quote unquote, traditional ways, in ways that were connected to these lineages, but did make use of modern, you know, metal needles and modern hygiene techniques. And these, it's amazing. And it's amazing that you, and I didn't know that, but that you and Kina had these conversations to really figure out what was going to work, like practically as well as kind of ethically and
Yeah.
culturally.
I think, you know, there's an argument of why we use machines. You know, I'll go and I'll mention this, is that, you know, some people say that, you know, our ancestors weren't silly. You know, as soon as something as soon as something metal or fantastic came along, you know, that of course they'd pick it up and use it. You know, they use metal chisels now instead of in carving of wood. But then Keone had a different kind of way of looking at it, and he said, "Why can't we develop the traditional tools in to create more modern things? Because if we kind of go back, the origins of all of our prayers and our protocols come from the traditional tools. Everything that we use within that making of the tool comes from our environment, and we have a direct connection to the tool. But with the machine, it's metal. I find the machine, you can tell it what to do. It's almost like a slave, you know. Whatever you want to do, you can do with it, you know. But with the hand tools, it's different. If you're not right, if you don't do 1, 2, 3, 4 ABC right, things fall apart. And so, you know, you find that the tool will tell you what to do. And a lot of the times the tool will move around the person's facial structure or body in its own way, and it'll show you where to go. You just need to it'll guide you, and you got to trust in the tool. And so that's a different way of thinking. Even the holding of the machine, I'm right-handed, so the machine's in my right hand. But with the hand tools, the tool is in my left hand, and actually the hammer is in my right hand. So, you know, which one's guiding? You know what I mean? So it's all of that it's an upside down world kind of thing, and then we start to realize how much of Western kind of thinking we've taken on. That if we really want to get back to the origin, and then start to develop, what if we were allowed to develop these things, where could it go, you know? And so
Yeah.
we had these amazing debates and conversations about this kind of thing.
Yeah, it sounds sort of super humbling as well to think about the practice in that way, right? Where you're, as you said, the tool is kind of guiding you to some degree, and the designs to some degree. Although you have some conversation with it, you have some agency as well. I think it's a really different way of thinking about the whole process of tattooing and of making. I mean, of making art, making marks more generally, right? Where you're not, it's not, we talked about this, we talked to a copyright lawyer the other day, you know, this idea of the individual artistic genius making something their own brain and nowhere else is a very recent and very sort of Western European idea about how creativity and how art and how, you know, creative practice works. And it's really interesting talking to you to hear a different way of thinking about, you know, as you said, it's entirely sort of almost entirely the other way up, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, I mean, with copyright or IP kind of stuff with our things is like, I mean, I do contracts outside of that with Hermes and with different, and you really have to well, I don't own these patterns. These patterns come from the tribe, so I can't sell those. You know, I don't have a right to sell those. So,
oh yeah, well, I was going to say, I remember speaking to Maya about, because I was trying to make sense, and I was reading a lot of kind of 19th century stuff about Inuit tattooing, and it didn't really make any sense, you know. And Maya was so kind to sit down with me and help me understand and tell me what those sources had missed and what I'd missed. And one of the things she pointed out was that Europeans had come to see the practices in her community, and they were only able to understand them within their own lens, right? Oh, you know, this looks like ancestor worship, and she was like, well, that's not what we do, but that, you know, that's the way a white Christian, you know, 19th century person understood the whole thing. And I think I'm sure it must be the same for the stuff that you had to kind of unpick and figure out, right, where you were trying to make sense of it, where it was by asking the right questions, and already, you know, trying to figure out what even those oldest European sources had gotten wrong by figuring out what questions they were asking.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's some written work about, I got somewhere about, and it's a description of a Pākehā woman who was kind of kidnapped by Māori and brought up by Māori, and they had they did her kauai, and in this whole process there was someone describing from a distance, you know, how they put the ink on the cloth and wiped it away, and which was really interesting because that's not how it works, right? It looks like from a distance the ink was on the cloth and it was rubbed in, but it wasn't rubbed in; it was wiping away. And so, just that little kind of thing within someone else, you could tell someone had written this from a distance, and only taken in from what he could see, and you get that a lot. Kind of people don't really ask the right question, like you said.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I guess maybe that is a good place to sort of ask you. When we saw you in Greenwich, you explained at beautiful length and in really vivid detail this this real origin story of tattooing, moving through, you know, again, what a kind of Christian colonizer might have called the underworld, and these kind of myths.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling us that story? Because I think it's so, again, it's such an interesting, to hear you explain it again, really made sense in a way that I'd never really seen before in any of the kind of, you know, colonialistic encounters trying to describe the same story. Yeah.
So I guess one of the origin stories is of Mataora and Niwaireka. So Mataora was a young chief in, I would say, probably mid in the east coast kind of area, kind of thing of New Zealand, and a particular thing happens where they have a visit from Tūrehu, and Tūrehu were said to be kind of a fairy type origin, and they were sometimes quite fair skinned. I think she was said to have kind of like a red hair or auburn hair type thing, and so she stood out amongst kind of her peers and amongst the crowd coming on, and so because they were from Turehu, they didn't eat, they ate raw food or raw fish, and so to kind of, in a way, he was a bit of a kind of, you know, I guess he could see this beautiful woman, and has to kind of show off a little bit of his prowess, and he mentions how, you know, the fish that will be gathered will come from his fishing area, where, being a rangatira, or being kind of a chieftainly kind of line, that they had their own personal areas that no one else was allowed to fish there. And so, as time kind of goes on, they in their stay, I guess they kind of they kind of start to take a liking towards each other, and eventually her people decide, you know, it's time to return home, and she decides that she wants to stay and pursue this kind of relationship with Mataora. And Mataora, like I said, he was a young kind of young warrior, young kind of chief. And as she stayed with her people, because she had what we call like a ahua is your ahua is like I don't even know how to say that in English, but ahu is like not just what you look like, but what you emulate, kind of thing. You have just a nice way about, because of the way she was quite peaceful. The people fell in love with her, and maybe possibly he was a little bit jealous of this. Of course, she also catches his brother's eye, and there's an argument that's ensues between him and his brother, and then of course it goes towards Niue Reka, and the argument gets raised, and he eventually strikes her, and from that she is also kind of a rangatira or high status, and she doesn't have to stand for that, so she decides to leave. And so she leaves, and there's this whole kind of story of how he chases her through different islands. He goes through the different islands to find her, and there's this whole kind of epic kind of journey goes on until he finally gets to this island, and the island where the entrance to a place called Rarohinga. Rarohinga is said to be the underworld or the spiritual realm, and and so he kind of he comes across this tu wata wata. Tu wata wata is like a guard, I guess, like customs, right? He guards the kind of the entrance to tu wata wata. And now we can even look at tu wata wata as even our own mind, right? So it's going into a different kind of place, kind of thing, into the spirit realm. And so he asks Tu Wata Wata if he has seen this young woman come past, and so Tu Wata Wata asks him, well, yeah, would are you Mataora? I've heard of you. Yes, I have seen her. And what are your intentions? And I guess he said, well, my intentions are to return her back to home. And so he said, well, she is home. And so I don't know if your intentions are going to be you're not. I don't know if you're going to be very successful, because in Rarohinga we don't strike our women, and so, but Tu Atawatawas are probably a little bit curious as well to see what was going to happen, so he allowed him. Tu Watawata was said to be tattooed from head to toe, and anyway, and this was the first time that even Mataora had seen this kind of practice, and so he went down into Rarohinga, and as he came down into Rarohinga, he starts looking for the village, and I think he finds a circle of men with one woman and then a man laying down, and he can hear the tapping going, and he gets closer and he gets closer, and eventually he sees Uitonga, which was he didn't know, but the chief of the village, as well as kind of the father of Niue Reka. And in his arrogance, he kind of says, "Oh, why would you do this?" And he can see the chisel cutting and the blood falling. Why would you do such a thing, And so, I've missed out a piece. But before he goes there, he realizes no one will speak to him because he's not tattooed, he's not marked, and so he remembers the markings on Tuatawata's face, and he takes the charcoal and he paints this on his face. So that's hence why he can talk to them. So he's told, why would you do this? And so Uitonga kind of turns to him and smudges his face and says, well, unlike you, we don't paint our kind of our moko on, we ink it, kind of thing, and kind of embarrasses him. And of course he goes further into the village, and he is accepted into this village to kind of he wants to have a talk with his girlfriend, and they allow him onto the marae. And as he's working, so I don't know if you understand what that means. So a marae is a longhouse, and the people the tangata whenua, the people of the tribe, will sit at the longhouse. And if you're a visitor, you walk into the gate and you wait until a woman will karanga, will call you on, and they'll start to call you in a way to move forward. As you move forward, kind of thing. As he was moving forward onto the main ground of the longhouse, it rained, and it washed his moko from his face, which further embarrassed him, and even more so. So uh, he retreats from this and goes back to his well, to Uitonga, to his father-in-law that he didn't know, and asks him to place these patterns on his face, which so what happens, and while he's being tattooed, he starts to lament of how Niwereka means to him. And of course, he doesn't know that this is her father. And the woman sitting next to him and in this whole kind of process was her sister, his older sister. And so she overhears this lamenting, of course, goes to see Niwereka. Niwereka is in a state of wānanga, in a state of learning. And she's learning about Tā Moko, which is a type of weaving, hand weave that we do. And anyway, she asks her sister, who's this man? And the man kind of, and so she replies, well, the man is Mataora. He's my man, and we had an argument, and he struck me, and I'm back here, and so. The older sister in her wisdom says, in your time of in the time of his healing, take him to my house and heal him in my house. And so also Niwareka she also knows of, she's probably in a way the first nurse. And so she ends up being, because she knows of the medicine of the oils that come from certain plants. She knows of how to make kind of ointments and things like that. So she heals Mataora in the older sister's house. And in that time of caring and looking after him, they decide that they love each other and that they want to be with each other. So when he's healed, he decides, well, that's it. I'm going to take my missus back home. And so he goes. He goes to try to take Niwareka home, and of course the brothers and the family oppose him and said, what's to stop you from striking her again when you go back home? What's to stop us, this from happening again? So if you want to be with her, you need to stay here. And of course, still a little bit arrogant in his way. He's like, no, I'm going, and so he tries to leave. And the story goes that a tireiraka, the fantail, which is a tiny bird with a fantail on the back of it, he stops Mataora from leaving and says to return in a year's time, because the upper world is in turmoil. There's war, there's turmoil happening. Do not return, and return in the month of November in 1 year. And so, that tells us a lot of things as well with that narrative, right? So one, a woman and a man can look after each other in the healing process. It tells us, the month of November was important. It was probably the times that we had seasons just like every other smart culture. We had seasons for war, and we had seasons for growing, and we had seasons for, if we warred all the time, you wouldn't really live that long, kind of thing. So, you had to structure everything like that.
And it also puts tattooing really at the center of, belonging and family and reconciliation and reflection and honesty and mutual, as you said, mutual healing. Like it in that narrative, there's so many layers, as you said, about, the kind of metaphoric and literal functions of that act of being tattooed, and those details about, the lamentation and the regret and the trust, like all of that being kind of encoded and made visible.
Absolutely. All that trauma, those kind of things, definitely, it tells us a lot of how, even, in this story varies whoever tribe you talk to, but and things like that. But the main core of it is the kind of the aspirations of the people to making sure that this, someone is safe, someone, that space is safe, everything, so you can actually draw quite a bit from that kind of conversation. And the way that we looked, we weren't a literal type of people, we were definitely a metaphorical type of people. And of course, if I said it in language and stuff, it's different as well. When you say it in Maori, the whole meaning, when you understand certain words, they come with a lineage, that one word. So you can, bring together a whole bunch of meanings out of one word, right? So, so it's not just our language being metaphoric and also quite poetic kind of thing. It has many layers with it that come with it kind of thing. So to understand the language is another kind of thing.
And I think, I mean, the that also helps, I think, really to bring it back to the present day. Like, it really shows why or how tattooing has been such an important part of, as you said, this amazing kind of cultural resurgence of Maori communities in the last couple of decades, because the tattooing is one of the practices of many which, right, seems to have allowed Maori people in New Zealand and to actually, yeah, like, I mean, literally become visible again in a really particular way, right? And I mean, what's the current status? Are there lots of people doing moko still? Are there still elders who are a bit kind of, suspicious of it? I mean, I
No,
remember.
I think our elders are 100% in support. And no, I think, to be honest, it's going from strength to strength, and it's just so amazing to see. We have people, back home that are now. It's quite, we wanted in the beginning. I remember talking about we needed to make this a common thing. We needed to really bring it and make it common, like it's, you see it every day, And I remember when the first kind of the uproar, when you had the first kind of TV kind of presentator with her kawe, or the, from, not uproar, but you had these negative peoples in
Yeah,
society.
and you had, there's or there was a member of government, right? You had a
Yeah.
POA, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we got a number of. I mean, the head of the Maori Party in the government is full faced, as well as his partner, which is co leader, and she has her co-way done. And even that, in saying that, that we have co leaders as Maori. There's always a male and a female, and now you can look in our government is affected by that. There's not just, you don't just have one leader, and there's always got to be a female leader kind of thing, So that's how much Māoridom is starting to affect kind of our kind of way, our individual way as a country, to try to kind of bring in more of our native way of being, because it actually, even though we were great warriors, we were great debaters, and we're great at keeping the peace. And we realized that being on an island, you're not going to really live long or last long if you start warring each other. So, we were orators, and I mean, when you look at the kind of artworks or practices that came out of it, people like that, they had a lot of time on their hands to do this, so they had a lot of time to make
Yeah.
and build and create, so it wasn't like a 24-hour kind of job or anything like that. We had time to really make fine work and things like that. So, wouldn't that be an amazing place to get back to? Like, you didn't have to work for survival kind of thing. So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, as you said, we've all got a lot to learn. As you were saying, seasons for for taking time off of warring. I think, at this moment in time, the whole world could learn something of that attitude, right?
I mean, the objective is to get rid of war because it's a ridiculous thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure, absolutely.
So maybe like, just as a last question, how have you found your life as a tattooer in England, in your, in this part of your career where, um obviously you are a long way from home, in some senses, but you have an amazing, beautiful family, and you're tattooing in a really particular way. in Bristol? Like, do you find yourself? I mean, how does your practice look like day to day now? Are you
Yeah, I mean it's tough being away from home, especially because I get so much nourishment from my people and learning. And it's frustrating to be away from home for so long, and you see the learning and things going on, and you try to do things online and keep connected with home and keep your language up and all of those things. But it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I really, we homeschool our girls, and one of my girls is at TV and film college, and the other two are still homeschooling, but is trying to kind of have a balance of, possibly we're not really into the educational system over here, but, having our own kind of creating our own and educational system within our house and meeting other people around England. That's great. But yeah, definitely miss home. Definitely can't wait.
do your kids speak Te Reo? Do you speak to your
Nah,
kids in
they
Te
ignore me all the time. I'll speak Māori. Yeah, no, they just ignore me, kind of thing. I think, I'm taking my middle girl back home, and I think she's going to see, and I hope, we're going to walk our ancestor mountain, go see my grandfather and my father's grave, and maybe dip our toes in the sea and introduce her to actually where she comes from and share some stories. Hopefully, my sisters will take her somewhere as well and do some stuff with them. So hopefully, it's gonna be a great thing for her. I think she, finds they're very kind of native looking, quite different, and they stand out in Western kind of culture. And I think that kind of affects them a little bit without them realizing it. They don't quite fit in, and I think, it's trying to kind of create really strong children, aren't you? So, yeah, I mean, one day we'll go back home, but I also feel like there's something that I need to do here. And a part of my work is trying to educate non-Maori and making it easier for.
You do feel like an ambassador. You feel like an ambassador somehow, right?
Yeah,
Like you're sort of
for sure.
educating us all.
For sure, because a lot of people have, they don't know about Maori or Pacific Island kind of thing. So, there's a lot of things that are online that just aren't real. It's just all fake stuff. But I mean, it's nothing like I would love to see more Maori art and practices here. I think we've got some amazing artists in New Zealand, whether it be painting, clay, or whatever. We've got some amazing artists, and it's like they had the Te Māori exhibition in the 80s, and then they just recently had the kind of Oceania kind of exhibition and stuff. But that's just it's not even a drop in the sea, to be honest. It's there's so much that I would love to see more artists from Polynesia and from New Zealand to come to England and show people what we can do, and I think we could help a lot of people as well, and try to find, I'd like to get to that space where, we've been promised that there's this sacred, well, there's going to be this table that we're all going to join and we'll be all equals, and we start to realize, after a few centuries that we're like, what, there's no table. I don't think there's a table. We're here, but no one else is, and you're like,
Yeah.
what's going on, kind of thing, so, we've been working very alongside with First Nations of Canada and America, the Aboriginal from Australia, and our people are really coming together as Indigenous peoples. But we also want the nations of Europe to be able to, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there want to kind of learn a little bit more and find that place. Sometimes possibly they're not ready for it, or we feel that maybe, but we need to create that, like I said, that sacred space that where we can introduce or bring people into that space in a safe way, and in a respectful way that we can talk and hopefully find our similarities and differences to be something of beauty. So
Yeah, man. Yeah, 100%. And as you said, it's not just about the past as well. It's also about the future and about,
It's about the future, definitely.
continuing to build. Yeah,
Absolutely.
amazing.
Wicked. Yeah.
But Tay, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. If anyone wants to get in contact with you, be tattooed by you, where can they find you? Where should they go?
Okay, so I mean, Instagram, I guess. I mean, it's a hard name to kind of spell, but Te Rangitu Netana on. You just have to put my name, Terangitu, in any kind of search kind of engine, and it'll pop up with some dude with a funny thing on his face. And but no, I think, I don't know. I mean, like, if you want to find, I think part of looking for it as well is going for it. I like it that it's hard to find me. I do. I really do. Man, I can't find you. So, well, that's not my thing. It's part of the walk. You got to find me. So, but yeah, so online you can find me, and yeah.
But yeah, listen, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been such an incredible conversation. And also, as always, want to thank all of the listeners and the supporters, specifically our patrons. If you enjoyed this episode, we do have a Patreon where you can hear an episode like this weeks in advance. And you also can support the show. And at the 10 quid tier and above, you get a shout out. £15 gets you a book. But without further ado, I want to thank Stephen McCann, Roy Hoxem, Morpheus Ravenna, Chris Block, Charlie Lightning, Bob of Extra, Shit Jesus, Reed Forden, Lupe Calderon, Garnica, Kirsten Wright, Kathleen Burkhardt, James Schick, and Dylan. We're now getting to the point where I have to take a breath in the middle of that. But as always, you can find us on Instagram, Beneath Skin Pod. By the time this goes out publicly, episodes will also be on YouTube, so you can share them with your friends. But as always, I have been Tom.
I have been Matt. Thank you as well for just putting up with. We've all had like audio issues and I've had issues with my microphone and things. But, it's always difficult having conversations over these platforms. But it's just been as always such a pleasure, and I always learn something from you, Tay. And you're I love you very deeply, even though we've only met a few times. So.
Oh, it's so nice to be in, finally kind of get me down and we have a chat and stuff.
It's such a joy to talk to you, and I hope I'll see you in person soon.
Yeah, for sure. You guys look after yourself. Have a good Brighton tattoo show and stuff, and yeah, nice.
Cool. Thanks, man. Safe travels as well.
Yeah, thank you.
It's bye-bye from me.
Bye.
Bye.